Welcome to Parenting GPS, navigating your parenting journey. I'm Kari, Kling, the host of your show. Today, I bring you episode 3 of a 4-part series on divorce and children. We began with Dr. Margaret Rutherford talking about the steps to take and things to think about if you're considering divorce. The second show in our series featured Jessica Apgar, looking at mediation, divorce mediation, about how to resolve your differences to hopefully maybe not go down the divorce path. And in today's episode, we're going to be featuring Dr. Jenna Flowers, who is going to talk to us about healthy co-parenting, and she calls it conscious co-parenting. And I'd like to introduce her to you right now. Dr. Jenna Flowers is a licensed marriage and family therapist, author, and speaker. She is the author of The Conscious Parent's Guide to Co-Parenting, published by Simon & Schuster, and recently launched coparentwell.com, which is an online course to support divorced, separated parents learn how to effectively co-parent and raise well-adjusted kids. Dr. Jenna teaches parenting and has a private practice in Newport Beach, California, focusing on co-parenting, parenting, individuals, couples, and trauma. She is also the co-host of the podcast, The Mainspring Family Wellness Show, where she talks about all things parenting, all things family wellness, and is a parenting contributor for Fox 11 Good Day LA. She raises a blended family with her husband, and her children are 22, 17, 15, and 11 in that blended family. And so, Dr. Jenna, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Kari. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. I looked at all of your work online and have read portions of your book. And I just believe in my heart that if every parent that was trying to have a healthy co-parenting relationship could take the information that you're talking about and really put it into action, that it would be so much easier for the children, for the co-parents, for everybody involved.
Thank you. I agree.
And you're not only the author of a book on co-parenting, but you are a co-parent.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
you're speaking from experience, both personally and professionally. And so I'd like to begin right there and ask you, from your perspective, what does a healthy co-parenting relationship look like?
Yes. I think it does start first with getting very clear about what the goals are moving forward, which is how do we continue to raise well-adjusted children? Divorce can be a toxic rupture when it comes to the experiences that children can go through. But what makes it an even more prolonged toxic rupture is when parents are continuing to not get along and they fester. And then the children are around that kind of energy and are being parented around that kind of energy moving forward. So if you go into your divorce proceeding, um, knowing that like we really want to put our kids first, we want to acknowledge what our children are developmentally needing. How do we work together to get those needs met and take me and him or him and you out of it, out of the equation, so that you really just hone in on what your kids are needing.
And not only are you focusing on the kids and, like you said, taking yourself out of it, but you're really modeling for those children about, even though you might not get along the way you used to, you can still work through things and you can still communicate.
Yes, you absolutely can. I do want to say though that it takes time. You
Yeah.
know, some people from what they're for why they're leaving in the first place, you know, have gone through something very contentious or very difficult. There may have been years of a lot of difficulty. And so it's hard to get there, right? It's kind of what they say, like it's not a race, right? But
Right.
it's like, at least are you on the right path to be moving towards health within yourself and then providing a healthy environment for your children to grow up in. So I would say that, if you can hold back the jabs or the resentments, do your own personal work. That's really what is kind of number one. Your children will really benefit from it. But the people that I know that have stayed really resentful or feel justified to be angry and then continue to try to co-parent, those people often have more difficult roads ahead of them with their co-parenting. Conscious co-parenting is where you are aware of the intentionality that you want to have with raising your children, and you're also aware of what your co-parents' needs are too, that they're human beings, right? Yes, we shared a life together, but that chapter is closed, and so now I'm moving forward. I still honor and respect this person as the parent that I chose to raise these kids with, and there is still a family here, but we are raising them in two homes, and we're going to do our best to do it as best as we both can. And so I look for win-wins to set my co-parent up for success with the kids. I look for that for myself, and I hold the tension of that.
Mhm.
I hold it also with a level of honor and respect, because we are the two most important people in my kids' lives, right?
Well
And
said.
I I never let that idea go. So I
It's
never try
so
to
important.
disrespect that.
It's so important, Dr. Jenna. And one of the things that in the first series, the first episode in the series with Dr. Margaret Rutherford, we talked about, the kids didn't ask for this. The kids didn't ask for the divorce. And so you're so right. It might take a long time because people might be so hurt and so angry. But learning how to put that maybe aside for the kids, at least on a surface level, but to give yourself the gift of time as well is so important.
Yes, and I think that's where then, getting the divorce coach or a therapist, a good therapist, surrounding yourself with good friends to help you through the process, and friends that are wise, not friends that egg you on and say, you deserve so much better, or
Mhm.
you have every right to be just so angry, and then you fester in it, right? I like to hear friends that are good listeners to people, healthy support, but then also if somebody is maybe could be making a better choice, you say, are you open to some feedback?
Mhm.
I'm wondering if maybe you might look at it this way. What do you think? you
Well
know
said.
there are some actual research that says that I believe, I don't want to misquote myself, but there was a research study that I read that if you are hanging around and you're married, a lot of divorced people, your percentage for your own marriage to start to waver increases. So you have to kind of be careful sometimes of the company you keep, in terms of like, are we all helping each other become our best people out in the world? Are we supporting that, or are we bringing the energy down and not looking for solutions and looking for healthy outcomes?
It's such an interesting aspect about that, what you said about the research. It's really really interesting about being aware of who we are talking with and who we're hanging around with, as you said. And
Yes,
one of
and
the
how
things.
you're talking about it,
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that is so typical with parents that are going through the divorce process or already divorced, and I've seen this go on for years and in the families that I've worked with, is that sometimes one parent may badmouth
Mhm.
the other parent. It can become toxic. They can use them as a messenger, and putting kids in the middle as pawns. And that's really the opposite of being a healthy, conscious co-parent. What are your thoughts about people that still feel the need to do that, and badmouth their ex to their kids? What can they do?
Well, one is a person that is approaching their children, whether directly or indirectly that way, is a hurting person,
Mhm.
right? And so they may intentionally be trying to poison the well to get the kids on one side because they don't have a bigger picture outlook
Mhm.
on what you'd like to see as an ultimate outcome for your kids. See, where I come from with conscious co-parenting, my background is in attachment theory.
Mhm.
And so I've read and have studied, my private practice has been built on how do we raise children to become securely connected people in the world so that they eventually have healthy relationships and we're creating a legacy of healthy relationship. We have a 85% chance of passing down the same attachment style to our children that we have. All right. So when you have people that have more insecure attachment styles and they're raising their kids and they don't do the personal work that they need to, they will then often pass that same attachment style on because that is what has been modeled. So
Right.
when it comes to this bad mouthing, it probably often comes from somebody that hasn't done the inner work necessary to become a healthy person and to heal from whatever hurt they have. There may be some very real resentments that they have, and they need to go take the time to heal themselves
Mhm.
because then that backlash happens to the kids and they start to incite more doubt or concerns about a parent. And it does tamper with the attachment that they would have to the other parent.
And, my senses and my experiences, and I believe the research also supports this, is that when children aren't, they don't have the role model of healthy communication within the parent, relationship, even if the parents are divorced or one is remarried, both are remarried, that they tend to start to think that that's normal. That's all they know. And so it is so healthy to model that. And so here's what I'd like to do. You talked about attachment theory, and when we come back from the break, I'm going to ask you to just share a little bit, if you would, for our viewers about maybe what that looks like for those people that maybe aren't familiar with those terms, and then we'll continue to give people some tangible steps about what they can do, and you're going to share some of your own personal examples with us as well.
Sure.
So we'll be right back. Thank you. So, in the first segment, Dr. Jenna, you talked a little bit about attachment theory and secure, insecure attachment. Can you please share with our viewers a little bit about what that means?
Sure. I'm referring to the theory of attachment theory from John Bowlby, which came actually out of World War II. And when the children were separated during the bombings of England, and they were sent to live in the country. And so once these children came back and reunited with their families, they discovered that there were some similarities between how children had attached or disattached to their parents. So secure attachment looks like a person that has a real emotional as well as physical connection to their parents. They really feel like their parent has their back physically as well as emotionally. So the needs are met, the physical needs of the house, but then they feel really understood and gotten. They also have more expression to their emotions. They can understand how they're feeling and they can attune and track how somebody else is feeling. And
Mhm.
also, when they feel like they don't know what to do, like they're out of scope, they know how to ask for help. They also have healthier immune systems typically and more long lasting relationships and friendships. Now, the insecure attachments, and 20% of our population is actually avoidantly attached. And that is when someone is raised in a family where the physical needs are met, but the emotional climate of the home is like a desert. Nobody really understands each other emotionally. In fact, the bandwidth for emotion is very limited. So it's hard for that person to understand maybe how someone is feeling. You're allowed to be maybe happy or sad, but when you have other emotions that may conflict with what your parents disagree on, it's met with anger. And so that child kind of grows up thinking, I only have myself to rely on. And so they become very independent and they don't know how to emotionally rely on somebody else. Then you
Hey,
have
go ahead.
other insecure attachment style, which is ambivalent attachment, and that's usually 15% of our population. And ambivalent attachment, basically, it's like a push me, pull you experience in relationship. Sometimes you're here for me, sometimes you're not. And I get really anxious trying to figure out what kind of parent I'm going to get next. So they've grown up with a parent where sometimes they have this experience of feeling kind of seen, but then the parent gets preoccupied and they go away. They get preoccupied with work or a different relationship or something, and that makes the child feel anxious. And so they have a lot of experience of like, I want to bring you close to me, but now that you're close, I feel anxious about it. And now I push away.
Right.
And that can either kind of become two different styles. One, a pleaser, where someone tries to please, 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 because they've idealized the kind of love that they deserve, but
Mhm.
then they never seem to receive it. And then the other one is the vacillator, where then they get angry and they create conflicts because they're looking for the juice. Do you actually care about what I'm saying to you?
Mhm.
Can I see that you actually I mean something to you in this relationship? So you'll see a lot of conflict for people that have more ambivalent vacillator tendencies.
It's so important, and it's something that most people go through life and they don't ever say, well, what kind of an attachment style did I have with
Mhm.
my parents or whatever. But what I know is true is that the parenting cycle continues, and for so many people, again, what I said earlier, because it's normal to them, it's all they know. Whatever the parenting attachment is of the cycle is that sometimes that gets perpetuated because, again, that's all that they know. And so um
This is right, Carrie. And that's why if you really focus on trying to raise more securely attached children, even after a divorce, like you can have a rupture like a divorce and still raise securely attached children, because it's about your ability as a parent to sit with them and help them understand and process what has happened, how the family is shifting and changing. So your kids don't need to be scarred for life after a divorce.
right.
Based on the choices that you make in your parenting and how you help them understand what's occurred. That's why that bad mouthing piece that we were talking about earlier is so essential to eliminate, so that you don't create any more ruptures for your children than what they need. They need
Hmm.
to be able to understand that, are you guys still there for me? Do you love me? I mean, I've heard it from other children after a divorce. They say something like, well, does my name change? Is my dad still my dad? For really little children developmentally, there's a lot that is shifting and they don't fully understand the ins and outs of that, of course. And so there's
Exactly.
so much just in the parenting that we have to create stability for them after a rupture like a divorce has occurred.
And so many of the things I talked about this in the first segment with Dr. Margaret Rutherford, and I just want to bring it up here because, again, this is a series, so I want to connect it all. But we talked about some of the things that as parents we may be concerned with. That's not what our kids are concerned with. They may be wondering, well, whose house will Santa come to? And
Oh,
who's going to be at my birthday party? and
mhm.
and just some really tangible fundamental things that most parents may not even think that this is an important conversation to have with them. And so I want to ask you then, going back on what we just said, how can parents stop when they may have such anger issues, bitterness issues, whatever it is, and justified perhaps, but how can they stop that cycle of bad mouthing and using the children as, as a pawn, for lack of a better word?
Well, it stops. It's twofold. One is, you don't have any control over your other parent. If they are saying things that are awful, you can bring it to their attention and go, hey, I understand that you are still very upset over things that have occurred, and it's valid. Your feelings are valid about it. I always go with finding the genuine truth.
Hmm.
However, I've noticed that the kids are really upset over some of the things that you've said about me. And I would really appreciate it if either we can talk directly about it, or that you wouldn't share those things with the children because they're being impacted by what you share.
Exactly.
And
And
I'm concerned about their emotional health. So don't make it
exactly.
about you, right? If you're the person being badmouthed, make it about how the kids are being impacted. Because if you have an ex-spouse that is really intent on bad mouthing you, they don't care about how you feel. They want to hurt you, but they would probably care how the children are feeling and if they're impacted.
Right. So it's about stepping out of yourself and looking at the feelings of the children and maybe putting your feelings aside
Yeah.
for that moment. So that brings me to the question, and I know you do this very well with your co-parent Eric. And for those out there, um, Dr. Jenna has a podcast, and I believe it's number 6. It's
Mhm.
a conversation with her co-parent, and I was really touched by that about how you two do that. Could you share with our viewers, please, how do you and your co-parent communicate, use communication so that even though your children are, in two separate homes, that you are still making sure that their needs are met and that they're having a positive relationship with both parents?
Right. Okay. I do want to set the tone for, we were married for 17 years. So that's a lot of time in raising kids together already. And we had a 7-year difference between our oldest daughter and then our younger boys. So knowing that, there was a lot of history of parenting well with each other. Okay. Now, some couples don't have that. And so I just want to acknowledge that with this story. But what I decided with 3 kids, I myself as a parent often felt overwhelmed with raising 3 children. I know you with raising twins. I'm sure you've also felt that at different times too, right?
Hmm?
There are so many possibilities for loopholes, like of things that just get lost through the cracks with homework, with baseball mitts in one place and not in where we thought it was, and things like that, that I just wanted to set the tone with Eric and he as well, like let's just communicate on a regular basis so that the kids aren't suffering as a result of us having 2 different homes. Let's be in like, what are we needing? How do we work together? So we will often have like a text in the evening before on like, hey, just FYIs. We don't have a problem with reminding each other
Mhm.
about stuff. It's never something I take personally. It's never something he takes personally. It's about helping each other make sure we're on the same track with pickups, with drop offs, with birthday parties that are coming up, with who's got to be where, because we just want to make sure all the bases are covered with the kids.
So important. It's so
It's so
important.
important.
It's so important because, as we said at the beginning, your kids didn't ask for this. You're still the mom and the dad. And so let's take that communication to the next level. And I know you have a story that goes with it, and I think it's so important. How do you how do you have consistent discipline with
Oh,
your children when
yes.
they're in two different places? Because sometimes, and I know I've worked with families, and I know from my own experience growing up, sometimes kids will think, okay, I might be in trouble here, I might be grounded here, but I'm going to dad's
Right.
house, or I'm going to
Right.
mom's house, so it won't matter. Will you play on that for us?
Sure. Eric and I really share the same values with we want to raise children that end up being self-corrective adults. That's my bottom line. That's his bottom line. And I want to make sure that if something happened here at my home, that if there's a consequence that is as a result, that we actually see it through so that our kids have a real understanding of what needs to be learned. So we have each other's back on this stuff. For instance, my kid was on his Nintendo Switch the other day. The show, it's a baseball game. It didn't go so well. His team didn't win so well and he blew up. He just lost it. And I didn't like how he behaved. And I said, we've talked about this. I understand you're very attached to the outcome of this.
Mhm.
Didn't go your way. But this level of blow up over the Switch game not going your way, we need to bring this to a close. And so we're going to take a break for the next week. And the next day was Dad's Day. So I call up Dad and I go, FYI, the Switch is locked up here. It's not coming home. And I said yes to the following weekend. He's like, no problem.
So it's
Likewise, the same at his house. He would call me for something, and I'd be like, no problem.
Yeah, so you're carrying through with your decision, even if it's not at your house. You're both in agreement, which is
Yes,
so important because children, and I think it starts young.
it
They'll
absolutely starts
figure
young.
out very quickly how to play mom or how to play dad. To not intentionally, like, oh, I'm going to get them, but they'll figure out how to get what they want if they think they can make it happen.
Yes. And it also happens in homes where the parents are together.
Totally.
I've frequently heard of like, well, dad said yes and mom
Yeah.
said no. And so I know who to go to, and oftentimes the parent that is saying yes really wants to be liked
Mhm.
by their kids, or they're working long hours and they feel like, I just want to have fun.
Yeah.
And, they want to be the friend parent, and then they don't see the bigger picture on what are we teaching?
Right.
What are we teaching?
Absolutely. And so it's about what is the bigger thing you're trying to accomplish, not just a momentary, this is fun, although it's important to have fun, but you've got to keep those boundaries consistent, because in the long run, you can have more fun if you stick to it. So when we come back, let's give our viewers some more tangible examples of things that they can do to improve their co-parenting relationship, or if they're getting ready to have that, if they're getting ready to
Sure.
face a divorce, about where to begin. And we'll be right back. Dr. Jenna, we talked about a lot of things so far, and what I'd like to ask you is, what is the role of the child being able to have input in a conscious co-parenting setting?
I think attuning to your child's needs and their feelings are really important, but we also can't make um, decisions out of emotionalism. So it's kind of like in just regular parenting. You can hear your children, but at the end of the day, it's you and your co parent that have to come together to make the best decisions for your kids. They may have a preference on, like, I'd like to wear this red outfit instead of this green outfit, or I'd like to have this meal today instead of that. But you're still the parent, and you ultimately get to make the decisions that are necessary to raise your kid well.
Right. But finding out what they're thinking and feeling, is really important in any kind of
It
parenting.
is. Understanding how they're doing and checking in with them also helps you address other resources that they may need too. So to check in and go, how are you doing with living in two homes? What are you needing?
Hmm.
You know, um, like when you have a sad day and you say you're missing mom and you're at dad's, do you guys already have something explained where we just make a call, or we set up a time to call regularly, um, that you have access to the other parent? Meanwhile, that parent is also being respectful that it's the shared time for the other parent. So it's not like you're just on the phone all day,
Right.
but you give the experience of, we are both there for you,
Right. And
that
I
we're
would love
not
to.
trying to hold back access to the other parent.
Right. It's not about, this is my time, you can't talk to your other parent. And so
Right.
it's about giving options, what I'm hearing you say, and it's about keeping those lines of communication open
Open.
all of the time.
Mhm.
As a former educator, I can recall so many wonderful situations where both parents, even if they were remarried, showed up at school for an
Mhm.
extracurricular activity, a school play, whatever it is. But I've also witnessed when a parent didn't come, and the rationale was, well, it wasn't my day. Um,
Right.
what are your
That's so
thoughts about
sad.
that?
I just find that really sad, and I don't understand why people can't come to better conclusions. Now, I say that, and once again, there is a certain population. Maybe there was domestic violence in the past. Maybe there was something where they just feel very unsafe to be with that other parent. And if that's the case, then people have to set the boundaries that they need. But it's just important that that child would know a certain reasoning why mom and dad have both decided that they can't be at the same place at the same time for whatever that reason. And you share it at the to the level that a child is developmentally able to understand it. You don't go into too much detail.
Right. And the important thing being that the child knows it's not about them.
Right.
We have some questions from our
Mhm.
viewers, Dr. Jenna, and after the break, we're going to come back and ask you those questions. We'll be right back. This is the part of the show where we hear from you, our viewers, and I like to call it your parenting destination. Dr. Jenna, we have two questions for you today, and I'm going to read them to you right now. Our first question is from Chris in Topeka. And Chris asks, how do I model a healthy relationship for my child when they're not seeing a healthy relationship being modeled with my ex spouse?
This is a great question, and a lot of co-parents end up in the same predicament. And what I would suggest to you is to continue to model healthy parenting and relationship on your end. That's all you have control over. Now, if there are certain factors at the other home where there's a lack of safety, where it becomes so confusing and then there's neglect, then I do think you have to bring it up to that co-parent and give them maybe a gentle reminder or like, is there a different plan that we can come up with? You may have to change eventually custodial time if that's the case, but you have to also accept that how someone is relationally in their future relationships may look differently than your relationship.
Mhm.
And so all you have control over is how you are in your relationships and what you're modeling to your kids. The other piece is you can help your kids understand it. If they bring it up, if there's something that's happening at the other house where they don't understand, like for instance, example, like, well, mom's boyfriend, he stays over all the time and we don't really get so much time with her. Maybe that parent go, well, you know, how does that make you feel? Maybe bring that up to mom that you'd like to have more time. If you have a really good co-parenting relationship, it could be something that you could actually bring up for them. And you could say, like, is this something you'd like me to talk to mom a little further about? And you can just say, hey, FYI, the kids are seeming that they need to have a little more time with you when they're on your shared time. It seems like your boyfriend's been over a lot, and so they just feel like they're not getting the same amount of time.
So,
It can be very short but sweet. It doesn't have to be like, "You're a bad parent because,"
right.
accusatory, anything like that, but just like, "Hey, this is what I've heard through, what the kids have been sharing, and so I just wanna bring it to your attention."
So again, it's the bottom line is about communication and don't ever stop.
Yeah.
Our second question today is from Trudy in Fountain Hills, Arizona, and she writes, my ex-husband and co-parent has remarried. His style of parenting is less structured than mine, and he sometimes ignores or doesn't follow through what we originally decided on. He becomes angry when I try to have a conversation about this, and then I become more frustrated. Do you think I should continue to try to work things out with him? Or directly try to directly talk to his new wife? I'm not sure where to set the boundaries.
Well, first of all, I think, Trudy, that's really open-minded of you to even consider talking to his wife. Some people feel very threatened by that, so I think way to start to even think out of the box. Couple questions come to my mind when hearing your scenario. And one is, how much time does stepmom have with the kids? Is she doing pickups on the days that your husband has his shared custodial time? Is she a primary person in the afternoons? What does that look like? Is she getting them to sports and different practices? And so, if that's the case, then you probably do need to bring her into the conversation. Some step parents don't have as much influence in the day to days of the kids, others have a lot. And so, with the other, with those step parents, I do think it's important that there's an open dialogue about, like, how are we all working together then to make sure that the kids are getting where they need to be and the needs are getting met. So what I would encourage you to do is probably go, hey, we've never had a real sit down with you and your wife, and I'd love for us to just, the three of us, kind of set out expectations for the kids moving forward, when they're at your home or when they're at my home, and how I can also be of help when they are at your guys' house if necessary.
Yeah, again, communication and being open. And by the way, for those of you watching, next week's episode will be about blended families, which is what Dr. Jenna just talked about, and more information um, from that aspect. Dr. Jenna, we are almost out of time, and I'm sure that our viewers are going to want to try to learn more about you, find your resources. May I ask you to take a moment and share with them where can they find you?
Sure. you can, if you're looking for a co-parenting class, I did develop coparentwell.com, and it's an online course for co-parents, people that are maybe recently divorced or on the beginning stages of their co-parenting. And it's a 3-hour class, and it's broken down into 5-minute segments, super easy, and videos to watch. There's also a bad mouthing guide, like how to, get how to protect yourself from bad mouthing. And there's checklists and assessments to help you on your road to co-parenting. And then also drjenna.com is my website. And you can find out more about my practice there, as well as the Mainspring Family Wellness podcast is up and running. It's been around for about 4 or 5 years, and you're welcome to listen to those episodes too.
And there's such a wealth of information there. I haven't listened to all of them over the years, but I've listened to enough to know, well, that I wanted to invite you on, and also that I know it's so helpful. It will be so helpful for so many families. And Dr. Jenna, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today, for being a part of this series, this 4-part series on divorce and children. Your wisdom and your ideas, I know, will help other people out there listening. And I'd like to close our show today with a quote from you, and this is so beautiful. You said, "Kids can only become the very best they can be if we become the very best we can be." Dr. Jenna, thank you for joining me.
Kari, thank you. And thank you for bringing awareness to divorce and how to be successful in a healthy repair and the aftermath of that for families. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your saying that. Thank you so much. Take care.